Hi there, welcome back. Adrian and Andrew joining you again, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by Mike from Thrive Advice. Mike's our elder statesman of the firm, very experienced in all things retirement planning and money planning things. Mike, eternal question, how much do I need to retire on?
That is an eternal question, and it depends on your style of living, whether you're a modest person or whether you're middle or whether you're lavish lifestyle required. So, and there are some numbers around it which I've got here at hand. But typically a lower income will need about 46,000, a middle income will need.
Is that for a single?
That's couple, and about $65,000. I've got the exact numbers here for a middle. And a higher end would be probably $80,000 plus. And you say, well, how old am I now, and how much do I need now and in the future when I do retire? And that requires a little bit of work, but those average numbers are fairly accurate, and they've got statistics behind them.
So chances are you could be working for a while to try and support 10 years lifestyle, Mike?
Oh, let's not bring into personal expenditure. But certainly, for a single person, for example, they could probably get away with about $24,500, and comfortable $44,000, and more comfortable, up to age 85, probably. Let's figure that right, 50,000. So it's not as much as people think, and probably about 65 to 70% of their income in retirement will be spent on living expenses, and the rest will be on medical and sundry.
Can you define comfortable, mate? Does that give them a trip away overseas, around Australia?
That's really interesting. A comfortable retirement at $60,000 a year would mean you could do a few renos to the house, about $6,000 a year, run your air conditioning and electricity for about $3,000. And restaurant dining, probably about $10,000 a year, so there's $200 a week. Good clothing, some people are not going to handle $2,700 a year, but having a reasonable car and enjoy a lot of leisure activities, which includes some domestic and the occasional overseas holiday. So $60,000 is generally going to be after tax, so it's a lot, probably more like $80,000 before tax when you're working. So $60,000 after tax is probably something that some people can achieve, and others, unless they start saving now, will need to put their foot down.
So just on that, Mike, I guess, if people realise they need to put their foot down now to make it happen, what are some of the things that they can do to try and kick it along a little bit?
Well, I guess it's different for each family, because some people will have a saver in their family and others will have a spendthrift. So you've basically got to make some changes. And I think the most powerful one is to add a little bit to your super each week. And the power of compounding, which I did with my children when they were at school, and I showed them how much if they put $500 in, it would be worth when they were 65, and they gave me $500 to match it. Yeah. It was incredible compound interest calculation.
The eighth wonder of the world, compounding interest.
Compound interest, that's right.
Mike, so I guess what else are you seeing? So that's obviously owning your own home by that stage?
You would hope so, and some people like to pay off their home loan earlier than others and then just sit on it. I think paying your home loan off earlier and using it as an asset to invest in other assets is pretty useful. Negative gearing has been a very common theme. We saw the opposition trying to put a hold on that in the recent election, but it's still got some power because it gives you access to money before you retire. But I think a combination of paying down your home loan, investing in other assets and super is the secret.
What are your thoughts on about borrowing against the home to go and invest? A lot of people are scared what's happening in the stock market at the moment.
Well, it's really interesting. The cost of borrowing at the moment would be between 3.5% and 4% for most people. So if you get a tax deduction for that of a third of that, your cost of money is around a bit over 2%. And if you can invest or get a return on that money of greater than 2% or above inflation or CPI, it can only augur well. And if you can get better than the CPI, well, that's really the plan.
Without your answer constituting investment advice, looking into a crystal ball, what do you see areas where people are getting good returns?
Well, I was at a conference only a couple of weeks ago where people are going to get poor returns is just having money in the bank. Because if we look at the Japan situation where they've got negative interest rates and there's bonds sold overseas for negative returns, I think the Australia and US market are probably going to see some pressure there, and so unless you look outside that interest or money in the bank scene, you're going to not do well. So obviously then property and shares are the two growth assets. A lot of people are scared of shares, but I think if you dip your toe in the water, and most people don't realise that their superannuation has a pretty good spread with shares and a bit of property and cash, and so that's why if you want to balance it, if you haven't got shares or property in there, and you've got to take risks to do that, but not high risk. They can be low risk blue chip shares, or property's a bigger chunk to get into as an investment. But come and talk to us.
Yeah, I do. I sort of see that a little bit every now and again too when I'm looking at people's superannuation and where it's invested. Quite often those retail super funds have different categories of investing. It can be, moderate growth, sort of in the middle, then your growth, your high growth, and sometimes people don't realise where their actual money is actually invested. Is it working hard enough for them at their stage of their life to get to where they need to go? And quite often, sometimes we do uncover that someone who is actually truly a growth investor, genuinely happy to be a growth investor, still parked back on a more balanced or moderate type superannuation. So that is worth looking at, because that does make a difference at the end.
It's a very important point, and it's a very simple point to implement. Doesn't cost anything, and the power of again compounding on a better return is a great thing to look at, and review your insurances at the same time.
I think that's right. Like you're saying, Andrew, time in the markets will go up, they will go down, but if you're in there for the long term, history shows that they go up over time. So if you're in the market long enough and you can afford to ride out those dips, you'll do well out of it generally.
And certainly, though, I must say that towards the end of your working career, and the closer you are to wanting to draw down on that superannuation, you do have to assess that level of risk at that point in time and maybe back it out a little bit.
So you don't crystallise that loss.
Yeah.
And that's right, and I'm in that category of the sunset of my career, but I think it's a risk appetite that you've got to look at, and people aren't living till they're 65 or 75 anymore. They're living till 85. So the longer you've got in retirement, I think you should be still prepared to take some risk. Certainly have some amount in cash that you can access each year. But if you look at a 2 to 5 year horizon and beyond, there needs to be a slight level of risk to have a return.
Yep.
Is it true you're still in a high growth phase, Mike, given you've got 2 daughters still to marry off?
I'll be in a high growth phase for the rest of my life, but I must say that high growth I have an appetite for without being silly, and certainly, right through retirement I'd be still remaining in a high growth phase.
We just want to thank Mike for joining us today, adding his input.
Absolute pleasure, Adrian.
Listen, look, Mike, if you like what Mike's thoughts are, follow us on Facebook, get on Insta, send us an email, shoot us an email, and give us some feedback.
Yeah, give us some comments.
Let's thrive.
Let's thrive.
Plan, do, thrive.
Plan, do, thrive. Right, thanks guys.
Thank you.